It's good to have everybody here tonight. Thank you for coming and being part of this midweek class. Let's go ahead and open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for this evening, the time set aside to gather in the middle of the week, to rest, to focus on you, focus on your word, to focus on the study that is before us, and to focus on each other, and to encourage each other and to build each other up. Thank you for being good to us. Thank you for your mercy, your grace that was extended today. Thank you for the opportunities that came our way, and I pray, Father, that we all made the most of our opportunities to shine the light, to make a difference in someone's life for the better, to not live just for ourselves, but to live for other people, to treat others the way we desire to be treated, to go the second mile, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and the many other opportunities that came our way. And we're thankful for those, and we pray that we lived up to them. We pray, Father, that we brought you glory and honor in all that we said and all that we did. Thank you for everything you have done for us. Thank you for your Son, whose life is our example and whose footsteps we follow, and that we desire to become more and more like him in everything that we think and say and do. We pray that you will bless us in our study tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we are going to start our study, Wednesday night study on encouragement. On what that means. So I'll go ahead and tell you, Jeff will probably get me for go ahead and telling you this, but this won't be 13 weeks. But what we've got, we'll go deep into this. So we're not going to leave a stone unturned, but it won't last 13 weeks. There's Jeff. Jeff's going to get me for this. So, but it will go as deep as we can get it on a Wednesday night. So tonight I want to be more of a lecture. Let you take notes, lay a foundation, lay kind of a groundwork. So if you obviously have something to say, just raise your hand. But I won't have a lot of questions for us, but I hope you'll be able to stay engaged anyway. Lecture is not necessarily my style. You know, I like to have a lot of questions, but I hope that you'll be able to follow along. So why would we study encouragement other than the fact that that's what I wanted to do? Because I asked Jeff about this a couple of months ago. I actually started thinking about this when I was in preparation for the Father's Day sermon, to be honest with you. I did something along those lines, and we'll tie that in. And that Father's Day sermon, by the way, was that fathers, one of the things we need to do as men when it comes to our children is to be encouragers. It's easy to get on. It's easy to try to spur. It's easy to just constantly criticize. It's easy to constantly just push and push and push. But as fathers, we need to be encouragers as much as anything else. So I planted a seed in my own mind and wanted to do a deep dive into it. And I approached Jeff, and Jeff said we hadn't done anything like this in quite a while, so I thought it would be good for us to have on a Wednesday night. So why study this? A couple of things. One is that encouragement is a form of biblical love. It's a form of biblical love. And it's not just agape, it's actually phileo love. It's that brotherly love, that family love. That encouragement is an extension of that. This is what families do. So when you as a family get together and share a meal and you talk about each other's day, that is a form of encouragement. When you tell someone at the table, you tell your spouse, you tell your children, how was your day? Hey, you did great today. I'm proud of you. That's a form of encouragement. That doesn't seem like love. That just kind of seems natural. That's what families do, but that is actually family love, brotherly love. Well, that's kind of what we're supposed to do as well. There's a big emphasis on encouragement in the New Testament. Big emphasis. And it's not going to be because you see the word encourage or encouragement. It's going to be because you see that and you see what people are doing. Barnabas comes to mind. But there are others who do that. But there's a big emphasis on the New Testament when it comes to encouragement. It's part of God's character. God is love. God is holy. In Romans 15, God is called a God of encouragement. This is what he does. He encourages us in a variety of ways, but he encourages us nonetheless. So if it's part of his character, then encouragement needs to be part of our character as well, part of of who we are as his people. And then you'll hear me emphasize this a whole lot. And those who are in the Hebrews class know that we talked about this as well. But the purpose of the assembly is to gather together to encourage. We don't encourage each other to assemble. My Hebrew professor said that we don't encourage each other to assemble, which is really what we've done most of our history. Rather, we're supposed to assemble to encourage one another. It's the purpose of the assembly. Now, obviously, it's to worship, to give glory and praise, and worship the right way. But what we do together, that is our purpose. This is the purpose of even this assembly. And it's not for all the other things. So these are just some of the reasons. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the reasons. So just a couple of technical words. I know it's a Wednesday night. I know you may be mentally fatigued, but kind of bear with me as we go through this. So I want to kind of step to the side. I want to stand in the way of Tom and Deidre over here. So I'll try to move. So every instance of encouragement in the Old Testament has this meaning of being to strengthen. To strengthen. So recognition is somebody's weak in whatever way it is. The recognition is somebody or something is causing somebody to be weak. And the purpose of that in the Old Testament is to strengthen. Now, you won't hardly find the word encourage in the Old Testament, but there's a lot of references. And we'll get into a lot of that a little bit later in another lesson, kind of what that looks like. But I didn't put the Hebrew word up there because I can't pronounce it. So I just kind of put it as a generic, but most of your references in the Old Testament with Hebrew and Aramaic, it means to strengthen. There are three main original words from the Greek language in the New Testament that go for encouragement. So your word encourage, your word encouragement, those types of words are going to be one of these three Greek words. So the first one's kind of a catch-all, and it's called parakaleo. And it's a compound word. So you're taking two words, and you just kind of smush them together, if you will. So if it's a compound, so you've got this one. Kaleo means to call. That's where we get our English word call. You kind of see it, kind of hear it. And then para means to just come alongside. So the idea is that you invite somebody, you summon somebody, you ask somebody, hey, come over here. So it's the parent who sees their son or their daughter, hey, come over here, I want to show you something for a few minutes. And you show them something. Or, hey, come over here, I want to tell you something. You're inviting them to come next to you. You're inviting them to come alongside. So the thing that we learn about encouragement is that encouragement is not forced on someone. Encouragement is not me forcing. And sometimes we fall short, or we feel that we're falling short of encouraging, because in some cases we're not inviting the other person, we're actually just kind of pounding them with it. Encouragement is not meant to be a hammer. Encouragement is not meant to just force your way into the door. You invite that individual. You call that individual. You summon them. And then the idea is to exhort them, to encourage them, or perhaps provide comfort. So this is your generic word in the New Testament. Parakaleo. So you're inviting them. You're summoning them. You're asking them, hey, do that. The thing that we do notice about this is that encouragement is intentional. You're not going to accidentally encourage somebody. You're not going to accidentally, oh, I didn't mean to encourage you. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. I see somebody that is in need of something, and I'm going to intentionally try to meet that need, whatever that is. So sometimes it may be an exhortation. Hey, it's us telling our children, hey, just keep going. Just keep doing this. Those of us that are adults, keep your hand on the plow and keep going. No, there's rocks in the way. No, there's roots in the way. Just keep going. That's kind of what exhortation means. Encourage is obviously a word. Comfort. Comfort is probably the main word that we see a lot. So blessed be the God of our fathers who comforts us in all of our afflictions so that we can comfort. That's what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 1. Well, God invites us. Hey, I want to give you comfort. Come to me. Jesus' invitation. If I were a mother hen, as a mother hen, I called you. So that's kind of the idea. It's an invitation. It's a summoning. So encouragement is not forced, but it is intentional. And so it's a fine line with that. The other word, second word, is this euthumos. Euthumos. And it means to purposely, this is the specific meaning of this, to cheer, to bring cheerfulness, to be in good spirits, thus providing good spirits. So you can kind of see how narrow this is. So when would somebody need cheerfulness brought their way? When they are in what condition? Sadness or sorrow, right? I notice somebody's struggling. They're sad. I notice that they're sorrowful. I know that this time of year, I know at this, whatever it is, we're coming up on the holidays. The holidays are hard for people. It's just a sad time. So I find a way to bring cheer. Doesn't mean that it's going to be, hey, I did this. Now, why are you keep on being sad? No, we'll get into that a little bit more detail later on. But the idea is I want to bring this into your life. And if you want an example, Acts 27, verses 13 through 26, this is when Paul and his traveling companions Paul receives the vision by the angel, hey, you're going to shipwreck. Remember that encounter, third missionary journey? Hey, you're going to get in a shipwreck. You need to tell everybody you're going to get a shipwreck. And Paul goes and tells everybody, and they're throwing stuff over the boat. They're doing everything they can to prevent it, and guess what happens? Happens anyway. So what does Paul do? His cheerfulness, to kind of lift their spirits, he says, look, we're going to shipwreck, but none of us are going to lose our lives. I mean, we may be looking at that and saying, well, that's not very cheerful. But that says a lot in those days where there's no radar, there's nothing like this, and yet this man, an angel talked to him. Everything that he has said up to this point has happened to be true. That brings a lot of good spirits. Again, we'll see this, encouragement and all these other things. That's part of the life that we got to live in this world. Shipwrecks happen. You can throw stuff overboard. You can try to lighten the load. You can try to mitigate the disaster. The disaster happens anyway. What encouragement does is that it's there to pick up the pieces once the disaster happens, whatever it is, whatever that shipwreck is. So I'm going to do that. So that's what euthumos means, to cheer, to bring cheerfulness, to be in good spirits, and to provide that. So this next one is our biggest word, and it's our lengthiest word. So you can kind of see how that is. So it's a combination of three words. So you got soon, not son, but soon, para. So remember that's from that first one, klethemai. So soon para klethemai. That's the idea. And it means to encourage together. Encouragement is a group project. And you say, well, why do we need to get technical? Why don't you just say that? Because God created a word and used it within the Greek language to identify that encouragement is not just an individual gift. Encouragement's not just an individual responsibility. It's part of our project. We're a group project, right? School has started. Those of you that are teachers, you have kids, they come in and say, well, we got a group project, and here's my part. Well, part of the entire church, not just one of us, not just a few of us, but all of us, encouragement is our group project. Now, it may look different. For some of us, we may participate in that group project through verbal encouragement, through writing cards, through sending an email, through having lunch, through whatever it is. It may look different on how it is, but every member of the church is a part of the group project that is encouragement. So none of us can opt out. We can't say I can't do that. Because to opt out is to fail at the group project. And it makes us that weaker, much weaker. So when the assembly comes in and he says, do not neglect, do not forsake, it's not just the idea of just missing and not being in person, but the person who misses willfully, the person who neglects, they're saying inevitably with their actions on that particular day, I'm opting out of offering encouragement to the body. I'm opting out of that. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who neglects because they had a work trip or we're looking, those of us that were in the Hebrew class, this is part of the pattern of behavior, this descent. So somebody who leaves, somebody who is in the process of leaving the faith, the assembly and their attendance is one of the symptoms of what's going on. But when they're staying away, when I stay away, I am opting out of the group project to encourage each other. I'm opting out of that. I'm neglecting that portion of it. And any of us who remember that when we were ever part of a group project in school, there was nothing that made us matter than when we got together and out of the four of us, only two of us did the work. Right? Well, that's part of what happens when we do that. When we just stay at home When we just leave, when we just do any of that, when it's just not up there, we are opting out of the group project to encourage. And that's a huge, huge thing. Because the assembly is just that much weaker in the way that it is. So if you want an example, so a couple of examples of this. Romans 1, 8 through 12, Paul says, look, I want to come. I want to travel. I want to be with you. That way we can do mutual encouragement. We can soon paraklethemai one another. We can participate in this group project together. He wants to travel to the Roman church because I have a responsibility to you and you've got a responsibility to me. Not because I'm an apostle, but because we're part of the same church. So we got to gather together. We're all part of this same group project. This is what we're to do. Romans 12, 3 through 8, God has given us gifts. God has given us a variety of gifts. Why? Because the variety of gifts feed into the group project. So some of us are merciful. Some of us have gifts of service. Some of us have gifts of mercy. Whatever it is, you look through that. But those gifts are not the sum. What they are stepping stones for this. So those of us who have the gift of service, your gift of service is your contribution to the group project that is encouragement. If your gift is leadership, that is your contribution to the group project that is encouragement. Everybody following? That's a pretty insightful thing when you think about it. So when somebody is not here to contribute their gift that God has endowed them with, the group project, no wonder we fail at it sometimes. Because 2 out of 4, 4 out of 8, 2 out of 10, dare I say 150 out of 300, we're not there to do that. So why encourage? Because we want the group project to succeed. Because if we succeed in here with encouragement, we will definitely succeed out there with encouragement. Right? That's kind of the idea. So additional definitions that kind of go along with these. Again, if you're taking some notes. So remember our phrase, that parakaleo, to call alongside, to come alongside. But here's a purpose. So sometimes it's to comfort. Sometimes it's to strengthen. It can mean to strengthen and renew commitment. That's a combined thing. In other words, and we're seeing this in the Hebrew letter, there's a group of Christians that their faith is weak. Their faith is weak. And what they need, and the reason their faith is weak is because their commitment is waning. They just don't know. Should we stay committed or not? So the assembly comes in, as well as other means, and it's to provide strength. Hey, stay committed. Don't give up. Don't quit. Paul will say in 1 Thessalonians 5, encourage the faint-hearted. How many brothers and sisters? I wondered in my mind, I had it on my notes, I wondered in my mind, how many brothers and sisters in the lifetime that many of us have been in the church, how many of them quit because there wasn't someone to come alongside and strengthen and renew their commitment? And then I think how many of us were on the verge of quitting and someone came alongside and renewed and strengthened our commitment? They helped us. They helped us stay the course. They helped us endure. One of them, another definition to call, remember to invite or to ask, to come alongside, to strengthen for the purpose of fresh faith. There's a hymn that we have, my faith is old. Soften it up with oil and wine. Right? Our faith, as much as we may hear with our ears and our minds that it needs to be strong, sometimes it gets stale. Sometimes it gets old. It's the repetitiveness. Every day seems like Groundhog Day. Living by faith. My faith doesn't seem to go anywhere. Well, somebody recognizes that's happening in my life, or I recognize that that's happening in someone else's life. So I invite them, I call them. But for me as the one who's going to give the encouragement, my purpose is to strengthen their faith. Make it fresh. But it's not just faith. This last part is also important. Obedience. So we mentioned this again for the Hebrew class. I know this seems kind of a repetitive thing, but Hebrews 11 is always viewed. It needs to be interpreted in light of Hebrews 10 and 38 and 39. We're not those who shrink back. So what did Abel do when he didn't know what else to do? He worshiped. Enoch walked. Noah built. Abraham left. Moses rejected. Rahab hid. Samson, and the list goes down on what everybody did. So it's, yes, they had faith for sure. By faith, Abel did. By faith, but it's the obedience. So we see within each other obedience waning, kind of growing weaker. That's not the time to just jump on somebody and chastise them, because more likely or not, their faith is probably struggling. So encouragement is the proper response of one Christian to the other. Not chastisement, not judgment. Now, let me put this, and I'll go back up for just a moment, if I can. When we do this, the person who receives that may think it's chastisement, but it's not. And those of us that are parents, we know this. Because our kids, we're kind of, it comes across as if we're getting onto our children, but as parents, we're really not. What are we doing? We're trying to instill within them. We're trying to instill with them that mentality. Hey, don't quit. Keep going. But it sounds, or sadly, sometimes it comes across that way. Go ahead, Bob. Yes. And that is why it's rooted in love, which is what we're going to start with when it comes to our first main lesson. So you're right. If it's not agape and phileo, if it's not either one of those, then it will be chastisement. It will be rough around the edges. It will be tough. So all of these are there. This is kind of what we do for each other. So when I see somebody, when I'm reading over the prayer list, when I'm paying attention, all of these things are that. It's intentional. It just can't be about me all the time. I can't be the one who is always on the receiving end of encouragement. Because do you know what body of water in Israel is always on the receiving end of fresh water, but it never does anything with the fresh water? And how many of us are Dead Seas? Because I'm the one that's constantly receiving, but it's never doing anything, and then two, I'm not funneling it back out to someone else. I'm not feeding that out. Now, I'm not saying that we don't ever receive encouragement. It's going to be times where that happens. But if all I am is somebody who's receiving it and never giving it out, never providing it for somebody, maybe I'm more like the Dead Sea than what I think. And that's a severe case that really needs something else. So obviously, if we're talking about encouragement, then that means that what's happening at the moment is that somebody is discouraged. Right? That's the opposite. That's the hand in the glove there. So thumu or thumeo is the word for discourage, athumeo, and it means to lose heart. It means to lose heart. Now, those of you that know this from the Old Testament, you might find this depending on the translation you have. You might find that the translation you have may say that their heart melted. Anybody remember that phrase in the Old Testament? Our hearts melted. So if you don't remember that, the spies, when they come back in and the 10 give a bad report, the nation of Israel, their heart melts. Discouragement sets in. What is it that precipitated the rebellion of Israel when it came to the Promised Land? It wasn't that they decided we're just going to rebel. What happened was that they got discouraged. And the more they listened, the worse they got. Until ultimately, well, we can't do anything about it, so we're not going to do anything. So discouragement is so prevalent and so powerful that in that instant, it actually led to an entire nation rebelling. If you think about that for a minute. Within the Greek language, that's what it means. Athumia. Athumia means discouragement. But I put into brackets this idea. So it's not just discouragement. It carries the idea that somebody who's been plunged into something. All right, so the best way that I can put it, though it has no bearing on this whatsoever, but the best image I can come up with is, biblically speaking, when are we plunged into something? When we're baptized, right? So something happens to an individual, something happens to a group, something happens to a nation, and they are completely immersed into this type of thing that's happening. So this discouragement isn't, that's just something happened. This individual got plunged into something. This individual, through no fault of their own, though we'll see sometimes discouragement does happen because of what we've done, and we're discouraged because we were surprised that we reaped what we sow, and we're discouraged by that. The Bible gave fair warning. You shouldn't be discouraged by something that happens. You plant corn, you're going to get corn. That's what happens. But most of the time, when somebody's plunged into this, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes when it comes to examples, this just happens to somebody. This is just what happens to a family. It's what happens to a group. So when that happens, they lose courage, which is where we get, again, the idea of encourage. So English speaking wise, we are putting courage into somebody. That's what it means to encourage. Why? Because they lost courage. They were plunged into defeat and lost courage in the face of an obstacle or challenge. They lost strength. They were plunged into weakness. They were plunged into whatever it is, but they lost strength. This is all the idea of discouragement. So when we talk about Satan, his idea, one of the reasons why discouragement is so powerful of a tool for him is because look at all the things that are lost. Heart, courage, strength. Without one of those, much less three of those, how can we be successful in walking by faith and living by faith? So discouragement, the idea is to plunge us into that. If he can plunge us into that, whether it's guilt and shame because of sin, whether it's just some crisis that happens, whatever it is, if he can do that to us, then he does that. And obviously, it happens from a spiritual perspective. It happens from a moral perspective. It happens from an ethical perspective. So discouragement isn't just this idea of emotion or even mentality or an attitude. Kind of focus on those two aspects. Somebody's spiritually discouraged. Somebody's discouraged because of a moral failing. Well, we're kind of talking about this on Sunday mornings. People get discouraged because in the face of a battle that I knew I was supposed to be strong and courageous and not afraid, instead, I was plunged into fear and doubt. Instead of being this, I was this. And now I'm discouraged because I had this. Instead of being this way, I was that way. Following? That's kind of the idea. So it's a moral failure, ethical. We'll see some of this. Peter is plunged into discouragement, among other things, because he just said, not just a few days prior, I will never deny you. And then he does exactly what he said he wouldn't do. And his first reaction is as he weeps bitterly. Why? Because he's plunged into something that he said he would never do. How many of us get discouraged because we ended up doing something that we never thought we would have done? And we're plunged into that. The idea is that someone on the outside sees that we were plunged into that. And they come alongside of us. They invite us to come. And the idea is that I see somebody that way. I see somebody who's struggling. I see somebody who's been plunged into something. and I invite them. I call out to them. Everybody following so far? All right. So psychologists, and I thought it was pretty interesting that they did this, but psychologists, at least from their point of view, have identified 3 types of discouragement. And again, this Psychology Today, a couple of other places, and I can send you those links if you want them. But it's kind of interesting with the verbiage that they use to describe it. I think some of it's semantics. Tried to talk to Anne-Marie some of it about it over dinner, but I think it's still a pretty good way to do it. So someone has mild discouragement. Many of you just had a bad day this week. Just had a bad day. The next day was okay. Today just was a bad day. Just wasn't a good day at school. Wasn't a good day at work. Just wasn't a good day. But you bounce back. The next day is better, right? You ask your son or daughter again, hey, how was your day? I didn't have a good day. Next day, you ask them, how was your day? I said, it was good. Right? That's kind of the idea. I don't want to come across as belittling it, but this is kind of the idea of how they did it. Strong discouragement. Strong discouragement. Somebody has a hard time. And this is kind of where you're splitting hairs a little bit. The strong discouragement is just something is happening and it's lingering. It's lingering. And it just can't seem to break out of it. You're not bouncing back. And then you've got debilitating discouragement. You've got debilitating discouragement. This is the discouragement that really is kind of, I know y'all probably wonder sometimes whether on Sundays if I'm going to fall off the stage or not. But the idea is that somebody's just kind of teetering off the edge. You know, you're just so discouraged, but just the next gust of wind, and you're just going to kind of just fall into an abyss. That's Judas. Judas and Peter both do things they never thought they would do. One just falls off the edge. I'd give you a comic book reference, but I don't know how many of you would follow Batman or something with a particular thing. So if you want to know about it afterwards, it's a pretty good statement he makes in a comic book. But debilitating, it's someone with a chronic illness that hears from the doctor and saying, you're not ever going to get better. That's debilitating. So yes, you are discouraged, but you're on the edge of despair. Right, this is Jesus. This is Jesus who's troubled in the garden. Now, he doesn't give over to despair in the sense that it rules over his life, but he is on that strong discouragement. My soul is troubled because he knows what's coming and the cup isn't going to pass. He has got to go through this. Right? The strong discouragement may be when we're Israel and we have to have our Red Sea moment. You can't go back. You can't turn around and go back. But you got this big body of water that you can't do anything about, but you got to do something because if you go back, Egypt's going to kill you. And if you go forward, you're going to drown. It's kind of a discouraging place to be. And you need something to happen. It's kind of the idea. So I thought it was a pretty interesting way that psychologists have put it. So everybody is, the point kind of that I wanted to make in all of this is that everybody finds themselves, all of us, everybody here tonight, finds ourselves somewhere along this spectrum. Whether it's just today was a bad day, yesterday was a bad day, Monday was a bad day, to some of us who say this week's been a bad week, to all of us who say the last 18 to 24 months have been just terrible. Right? That's the idea. So we notice this. We need somebody, obviously, to come in and speak, but we've got to do this for each other. Which is probably where it has been as churches as a whole. The last 18 months has kind of revealed how well we are, how healthy we are at giving encouragement. You want to know one of the tests, one of the things that's been revealed? That's what's been revealed. How well we are. How healthy we are with this. That's what the last 18 months or so have been. How well we are in paying attention to one another and what's going on with each other. And if you're kind of feeling this wash and saying, I haven't done that very well, good. Because I hope by going through this study that all of us can do better. That all of us can do better. So examples. Just some that I have, and then we'll get into a little bit of a discussion here in a minute for you. So Psalm 42. If you want to just write it down, you can. Psalm 42. The psalmist over and over and over. This is the one where he asks himself the question at least 2 times. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you so sad? Why are you so sorrowful? He says, I believe in verse 3, my tears, I've cried so much that my tears have become my food. Because when you're in that kind of condition, spiritually, emotionally, physically, we obviously know it impacts us physically. We don't eat. We're in some cases we're like Elijah. We're so down that we can't really do much of anything else. So Psalm 42 is that example of that. Numbers 13, I've already mentioned this in verses starting with verse 25, going all the way to verse 12 of chapter 14. You've got Israel and the spies. The 10 out of the 12 come back, and they are so negative. They are so lacking in faith that their words melted the heart of an entire nation. That's examples of it. That this is what happens. And we'll get into a specific lesson that's geared about our words. And how our words are either going to be full of life and hope, or they're going to be negative. And it's life and death. It's kind of how the proverb writer put it. 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 through 6. It says in verse 6 of that David is distressed because people talked about stoning him. They are so distraught and so upset with his recent decisions, and they're not very good decisions. They're not. But who here hasn't made a very terrible decision? I don't need somebody else to doing this, but David's got his own people that the only thing they want to do with him is stone him. That wears on somebody, right? Yeah, he made some terrible decisions. Nobody's trying to absolve him of that. But on top of that, on top of living with the decision he's had to make, he now his head's got to stay on a swivel because he doesn't know when a rock's coming his way. Do you imagine that you make a decision and then you've got an entire group after you? An entire nation? 2 Samuel 17, verses 5 through 10. Absalom, his son, usurps the throne. Wants to know how is it that I can do this with my dad? So anybody discouraged with their family? David knows that. Because his son Absalom's usurping the throne, wants to get rid of him. So Absalom calls in this guy named Hushai. Hey, tell me what to do. And Hushai says this, look, if you go after David and you can succeed, the people who follow him will fall. Their hearts will melt too. They'll go, if you get him, you'll get everybody and you'll get what you want. Hushai gives that plan, but in that he gives an insight. Why does Satan attack certain people? You can get one. You can get those who are attached to that one. Discouragement. So something for you to have for next week, because I know the bell rang. If you can read this for me next week in preparation, we'll get into this discussion of being rooted in love. So we'll talk about agape for sure. But we'll also talk about phileo. So if you can if you need to take a picture, you can. If you need to write it down, you can. But just that'll be your homework for the week. Just read over that. It is an example of love, but it specifically speaks of Cain and Abel. And the reference to them in the New Testament. So that is where we will be next week. I'm glad you're here. I know we'll get ready for our service.